Hey guys, first start off. If you can introduce yourself, name and title.
I can go first. So my name's Scott Peters, one of the co-founders of New Math Data.
Trey Hatch, co-founder of New Math Data.
Cool. What does New Math Data do?
So we are a Amazon Web Services advanced consulting partner focusing on building data platforms and solving data-related problems for our customers.
New Math Data is an AWS consulting services partner. We are focused on data and analytics and generative AI and helping our customers solve complex problems in the data space.
What makes New Math Data good at what you do?
We are good at what we do due to our extensive experience in this field. We also take a very customer-centric approach and really focusing on their needs and a solution that works for their organization.
I believe we're good at what we do because of our experience, but I also believe that we have been purposeful in how we hire our employees, as well as how we make sure that our team is up to date on the newest approaches to technology and to solving problems in the data space. I also believe that we have hired folks and people who are independent in their learning and their thought process, and so it helps us solve problems across our projects without relying on a single place as a failure. It lets our engineers solve problems the way that they remain independent.
Now, around your messaging needs originally, what was the original challenge internally or the problem that you were trying to solve when you engaged with us here at TPM?
So we've always been an engineering-focused company. We're founded by engineers. The vast majority of our staff is purely a technical background, which is to say we did not have any focused marketing or sales people by background. As such, our approach to marketing was very ad hoc and not to say unprofessional, but not done by a professional agency, if that makes sense. We were looking to increase our capabilities there and engage with a third-party company with a deep background in marketing and specifically marketing for technical companies to make sure that we had a consistent brand message, in some ways kind of help us polish and define our own identity and grow our marketplace presence.
I believe we approached TPM after doing extensive marketplace research. We talked to a number of other marketing companies, and we ended up choosing TPM because we really liked the approach that you offered. We liked that you were thoughtful in understanding our business and our needs and the specifics of our market and how we currently engage with our customers. And that you also were thoughtful in how we might grow a relationship with a marketing company over time, that we needed to understand that we ourselves had things to learn about how we thought about our business, how we documented the things that were important to the marketing process, and that we would need time to grow ourselves. And the way that you guys approached the contract in our relationship allowed us to do that in a way that was cost efficient and also gave us time where we didn't feel pressured to jump in and understand that and make a bunch of decisions that we probably weren't prepared to make.
What was it like, and what is it like working through the messaging process from the early discovery at the very beginning to where we are now today?
I think it was a very kind of collaborative process. We were not familiar with basically going through this process as a company. So the TPM team helped us through that, helped us understand what we didn't understand, what we needed to understand, and provided resources to help us figure that out. So surveys, questionnaires, that sort of thing. And through that process, I think we've come to a much more focused vision on what we want to do as a company and working with TPM to position ourselves within the market.
Yeah, I'm going to answer this question, I think, slightly differently. I think it was a luxury. It was a nice luxury to go through that process. We have been in the execution mode constantly for the last several years, and stopping to think about how we might characterize what we had built is something that had never even really stopped to contemplate whether that was something we could do or should do. And so it was, I think it was a nice luxury to have someone help us through that process and help us understand the kinds of questions that other organizations may ask. And to the point earlier about independence of engineers, I think having this types of the poles of your messaging strategy, your tenants, I guess, that having those things set allows the independence of operations that I think is important to a company that's in our position. If we have things that we can refer to and say, these are our values, these are our goals, this is our vision for the company, then other people can interpret that and at least have some idea of what we're trying to accomplish. Whether or not they interpret that correctly is a entirely different discussion, but we've spent some time writing those things down. And as the organization gets larger, we have less time to spend with people on an individual basis so that they understand what our goals and vision and the things that are important to Scott and I. They have less time to spend with us, and we have less time to spend with them to help communicate those things. And so having them written down and polished and having spent some time thinking about them is great.
Right from the beginning of this engagement, I think both of you mentioned that you were looking to re-engineer, redesign, create a fresh brand, with the two halves being the messaging and the design, the look and the feel. Right from the get-go, those, you saw them as two parts, two sides of a coin. What value have you experienced? What did you see in wanting both those tasks done simultaneously? Your messaging strategy, the design of your new website, homepage, and so on. How does that move so far together today?
So I think working with a single agency for both of these tasks allows a lot of collaboration, both between the teams, and there's sort of a lot fewer communication pathways for us to deal with potentially two separate vendors. The TPM Dean's team has been extremely capable and very collaborative, both within themselves and with us, to really move quickly on both the messaging strategy and website redesign. And that's, we've got a lot of value out of that velocity.
Yeah, I would add a third piece to that. So the messaging and the visuals, but I also think the technical is another piece of it as well. I think working with the TPM team, you guys have handled all three aspects of that process simultaneously. So one, we get an improvement in the professionalism of our presentation. So things work more smoothly. Our website loads faster. We've cleaned up what the administration looks like. We've set some ground rules and some, policies or standard operating procedures for how we create messages on different channels like LinkedIn and our website and our blog. And then to echo what Scott said, I think it makes it a lot easier for us to be talking about messaging and branding, as well as discussing the visual aesthetic of our site and our brand and our different marketing materials with one team. You guys can hear us say it. You can also see us making decisions about how that brand looks in the same meetings. And I think those things end up reinforcing each other. We're not taking what is our brand messaging and strategy and going and giving it to a visual agency and saying, you guys interpret this. You've heard us make decisions and go through the discussion internally about what the messaging means to us. And you also have heard us do the same thing for the visuals. And I think those help reinforce each other.
Were there any aha moments where the messaging and design worked and clicked together in a way that you might think it might not have happened with two separate teams?
Honestly, I would never even consider doing this with two teams, just with the amount of communication and collaboration required. It's been extremely seamless working, coordinating one team, one set of meetings. We have a hard enough time coordinating just the two of us internally to talk, and let alone having to add another whole vendor in the mix. Yeah, I would not consider doing this differently.
I think there were it's a couple of moments that discussing both the visuals and the messaging components of this that made it amplified the effectiveness of it. Specifically for us, talking about the copy in terms of the math puns and math terminology that we used, and then also talking about how we can use some of the same a similar approach to generating the visuals for the website. That to me was a concept we would not have come up with had we been doing this thing separately. Hey, we're an AI company, we're a data company, let's talk about what we do in those terms, and let's also look at generating imagery and our design from those same types of puns or visual, the same visual vocabulary that we're using for the messaging. And I don't think that would have happened if we had done this separately.
The last question was whether you would, under the company who would consider splitting the messaging design up. Both of you said not for you guys. Can you think of a con, just to kind of play both sides of the coin here? The con of having one agency do both the messaging and design.
I think there could be.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I jumped in on you.
Mine's not great, so I'm reaching here. Go ahead, Trey.
I think the only drawback would be that you don't have an additional team that is interpreting that message. Sometimes that having additional people look at your aesthetic choices or your choices in terms of messaging and copy can give you a different perspective, especially if you have respect for the work that they've done. Also, I think sometimes seeing your messaging reflected in the visuals that are created by an entirely different team gives you kind of some perspective on how an outside group might interpret the choices that you've made. So I think if you had that luxury to do that, it would be an interesting choice. But I also think for a small organization that's trying to make these kinds of decisions quickly, I feel exactly the way Scott expressed it earlier, that I wouldn't think about doing this with a separate team, because it would be too much overhead for us to deal with. Like, we don't have time to deal with two separate teams, two separate meeting schedules, and then we don't have time to explain the choices that we made in messaging and visual choices to each of the other teams. Like, I don't want to explain our messaging choices to the visual team, and I don't want to explain our visual choices to the messaging team, and spend a bunch of time just trying to get people up to speed with things that we've already said. So maybe I turn that con back into a pro. I'm not sure.
Certainly, I think, to summarize, the velocity is one thing, but not only the velocity, but I think there is a symmetry with our product marketing team and our design team. And, in terms of design options, we did come up with initially around a half a dozen mocks that were eventually thrown away because we had a team working on, independently. So there was some interpretations done that were, initially thrown away. And that was the whole point of it, that there were a ton of opinions. And by opinions, I mean design interpretations based on the messaging that we presented that they were not to the liking. And then we iterated and iterated. So we were able to come up with some good ideas that right now we're resonating with.
Yeah, it's an iterative, creative process. There's not a straight line from A to B. From the impression I have been getting, you have collected a team of experts that has a lot of different backgrounds. They've all been very capable. I imagine you have more folks supporting them that we haven't directly met yet. But I think certainly working with Lisa, Catherine, Andrew, everyone have all definitely demonstrated that they know what they're doing, from the analytics through creative, through kind of the brand messaging discovery stuff we've done, and just the ability to communicate. And thinking about all the different communications you've had, like all the communication pathways you have doing work on any team, minimizing that is crucial, especially now with like so much stuff happening everywhere. So yeah.
Last words, Trey, I'll leave it to you. Any final words?
Final words, these guys have done a great job for us already, and you should use them to do the same for you.
Thank you.